without any further ado, it is my good fortune to bring Brett Warner onto the program again. Brett is the owner of Strategy Real Estate here in my community. He's a good friend of mine. Our lives we have so much in common. We spend a lot of time these days. He's one of my hiking buddies, actually, probably my number one hiking buddy. We spend a lot of time on the trails, but I wanted to bring him on and talk about the fact that he's got a new podcast that he started, but I also want to talk about real estate. So, Brett, you've sold more than $1 billion of real estate just in Kitsap County, and you've built a team up over the years. So I'm sure our listeners are interested in learning more about this and what you've learned about investing in real estate over the years. But before I get into all that, I just want to ask you, why in the world are you did you start this podcast up?
Well, the podcast was, once again, I just look for opportunities. And so I ran across a friend. We walked together for a few years and it came out. And for me, the podcast is a lot of times people want to sit down with me, and I'm kind of changing phases in life. And I think I was telling you before we started the show, I've said the same story to many people 412 times over, but I still enjoy telling it. But as I go, I kind of trying to free up some time and just kind of manage different things in different ways. And so I thought with the podcast, I could then, as I meet people as I'm along my way, I could just pass out the card, or it'll either just get some organic growth, or either my grandkids will get some advice 2 generations down the road. And I don't know why, but sometimes people seem to like to walk with me and get my outlook on finances, spiritual life, and just like what drives me. And so I found if I did a podcast, I can cut my repeating my story over many, and then say, well, if you like with that, then now let's talk about your specific circumstances now that you know how I think. Half the time trust is built by people understanding how you think, even if it's sometimes not even rational in their own mindset. And if they walk with you for a while, they'll see a pattern and they'll say, oh, well, the evidence is showing. And then sometimes we'll enlighten one another. And I always say I like to walk with people because I'm a little crazy. And so it's good to walk with normal people.
Okay. So now you've sold over $1 billion of real estate. And
Yes.
And that's in itself pretty impressive in this little rural community that we live in. But just as impressive as you are a real estate investor yourself. In fact, that's kind of your genesis story. It's not just that you were selling real estate, you were buying real estate. You do buy real estate. You've bought all kinds of things, from apartments to single family houses. And so maybe you could give us a little bit of the background story. Like how did this real estate investing career get started for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the crazy, right? I mean, I came over here and I just had no job, and I came over from the other side of the water and said, let's just do this. And I got a few years to make it happen. If it doesn't happen, I go get a job again. And
so your first house, what was your first? I mean, you came over here with a little bit of money in your pocket. You had about a year's worth of cash. What was the first thing you bought?
Well, my wife needed a house to come to, and so I found a house in this little neighborhood that was a nice neighborhood, had sidewalks. And my wife said, and she said, I want a neighborhood with sidewalks so we could walk. We were just having kids. And
were your kids born yet?
Blake was just born, and Lindsay was on her way.
Okay, so your son was just born, and that story in and of itself, your son being born,
that's crazy.
That's great. I mean, it's not like everything just went smooth sailing.
Oh no, yeah, I didn't come over here and say, oh, I got a job and they've hired me and now I'm on the W-2. I just sold my house and said, let's do it. And so
after this, after your son coming into the world in conditions and terms that were pretty scary, actually.
Other different town, yeah, absolutely. He was born.
So you decided, hey, I'm just going to quit my job.
Yeah, my son just got out of the NICU and out of everything. We were sitting there and he was in intensive care for a while, and then he went on to the pediatrics, and we were there. And while we were there, I said, well, I see opportunity in this other county. Let's do it. And literally, even that part of that crazy is like, I had within 2 years, I think I was at 25, 30 units. So I was, anybody at that pace of growth, they know when you come over here with 40.
Well, wait. Let's see. Before we get to 25 to 30
I bought
units.
my house.
Okay, bought your house.
I bought my house, made my wife happy because she wanted to come here.
And she got sidewalks.
She would have took a rental, but I knew it was best to buy. And so we bought a house, which I thought was a good deal. And I went and bought a duplex. Bought that
duplex.
Duplex.
So duplex was your very first investment property.
Yes, yeah,
so tell us about that duplex.
Well, the duplex was.
What'd your wife think of the duplex?
She thought nobody would ever rent it out. yeah. She said, nope, nobody's going to rent that. And I said, well, I think it will rent out. And I had it rented in a week, so we closed on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this rental today. I mean, you remember this 20 years ago. I think she thought it was too expensive. It was $60,000. I think I got it for $58,000. And essentially in a year and a half, why I bought my house, I bought that. I also bought a 5-unit. But after I held that 5-unit for a little while, then I sold the duplex 2 years later, making $100,000 because I bought it for $60 and sold it, I think 2 years later, maybe 2.5, 3 years later, for about $180. And then my house, because I wanted to get into my permanent house, which we were in a nice neighborhood, but I didn't want to have such close neighbors. I sold right after 2 years living in my original house. It went up $100,000, so I sold that house.
So your daughter must have been born right around that time.
She was born right in, and that she was born a couple months before we moved into our new home.
So don't think there's ever going to be a good time, I guess is what I'm hearing you say, because these are stressful times when kids come into the world, especially when the first one is in the emergency section of the. Yeah. And
one thing I can say, me and my wife, we sometimes will disagree, but she's always supported me. She's always, there's times I'm like, let me do this. And she's, seeing me distressed and being up sometimes through the years, but she really has let me just kind of run. I joke with people and I tell her, we only have a little bit. And she just trusts me. And it really does mean a lot that, and I don't know if it has to be the husband or the wife, but the other partner that doesn't have that risk graph that they can live in and say, hey, I'm okay with a little bit of losses to get some gains. The one who is more conservative, if they can trust that person, you can go a long way. But it's good to be accountable also to the one that might be more conservative.
Yeah, good to have a partner that kind of balances things out. Yeah. So, all right, so you bought the first house, you bought the duplex, you sold it 2 years later, and shortly after you bought the duplex, you bought a 5-unit?
Yeah, basically I came in here, I spent $40,000, so I had $50,000 and no job to figure out how I was going to get these houses. And so I bought that, the duplex. I think I had to put like $8,000 down on.
Now wait, you didn't have a job, so this must have been back in the day when the banks were just lending money to anybody for any reason. You didn't have to have any.
Correct. I just got out of a job, and it was one of those things where you're going, I'm going into a job, so they were a little looser on guiding rights. But that's the next chapter, because they actually had on my third property when I went to go buy the 14-unit. Then they said you need a job. And that's when I opened Strategy Real Estate.
That's when the real estate brokerage firm.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, I forgot about a building in there. There was 2 buildings on a duplex and a house on 6th Street. That's when I needed to get the job, and that's when I decided, well, how am I going to get income here? And so I opened Strategy Real Estate.
How long were you holding most of these properties initially? Were you just kind of turn and burn, just get in there and fix them up and get rid of them, or were you holding them for a long period of time? Or
I find it funny because I find that when I thought I was going to get long money, I ended up selling it short. So I got a 30-year loan thing. I'm going to hold this thing for 30 years. Next thing I know, the thing went up, and I looked at my ROI, and I said, wow, I'm up 100. I'm always looking at ROI, see? So a lot of people will look at the value, and they'll continue to rest in that value. And if I buy a house, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, and I said to him, okay, so you got that property for 180, and this is just last year, and which is a great price for this market. And I said, if that property, we already got the, forgive me, he paid $250 for it. So he's about $230 into it. And then what happened was he turned around, it might be worth $400 by the end of this year. And I said, if I told you not to sell at $325, if this thing hits $400,000, but you really could need to consider if it's $425, you're foolish not to sell it. I said the reason why is you got $30,000 into this and you made $150,000. What's your ROI in 2 years? I said, so if you hold on to that, now you can go out, you can take that to $150, you can put $70,000 into savings, and you can buy another duplex, hopefully, with that other $70,000. But right now, it's all in one egg. And so he's like, oh, I see what you're saying, that it's not about the value of the house, it's about your ROI on your money too. And actually, that's more important. So I'll look at somebody, so some houses I thought I was going to hold a long time, and I bought it for $200,000. Let's use the duplex for example. I bought it for $180, a fiveplex. That's crazy. And basically, I turned it around. About 2 years later, I sold it for $380. And I said, that's $200,000 in a little more than 2 years. I'll take it. And at this time, I was starting the real estate company, and I was still buying. Then I bought a 50-unit apartment, and many did houses and flips and stuff.
A 50-unit apartment.
Yeah. That was the largest apartment building that I owned personally. I've managed larger, but we got out of that as quick as we could.